The Good Friday reading is from John 18. Listen to the word, beginning with verse 28. Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews replied, "We're not permitted to put anyone to death." Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you to ask me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you're a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king? For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone belongs to the truth, listens to my voice." Pilate asked, "What is truth?" After he said this, he went out to the Jews again and told them, "I find no case against him, but you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover. Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" They shouted in reply, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a bandit. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. And the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they dressed him in purple robe, and they kept coming up to him saying, "Hail, King of Jews," striking him on the face. So they took Jesus and carried them by himself. He was carrying the cross, and he went out to a place called Golgotha, the place of the skull. There they crucified him with two others, one on either side, with Jesus between them. After the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts. They also took his tunic. The tunic was seamless, so they didn't want to cut it up. "Let us not tear it, but cast lots to see who'll get it." Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing there beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his own home. After this, when Jesus knew that all was finished, he said, "I am thirsty." A jar full of sour wine was standing there, and the woman put a sponge on it and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the wine, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Since it was the day of preparation, the Jews did not want the bodies left on the cross during Sabbath, especially because the Sabbath was a day of great solemn holiness. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a secret disciple of Jesus, because of his fear of the Jews, asked Pilate to let him take away the body. Pilate gave him permission. Nicodemus, who had also come at night to see Jesus, also came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes weighing about 100 pounds. They took the body of Jesus, wrapped it with spices and linen cloths according to the burial custom of the Jews. Now there was a place in the garden, and in the garden was this tomb which no one had been laid, and so it was there that on this Jewish day of preparation, and the tomb where Jesus was laid. This is the reading of the word for the people of God. Thanks be to God. I don't know how to tell you this story of what happened in the last 24 hours. It began in the morning after this wonderful Passover meal. I was with Mary and her sister and Mary Magdalene. We women, we celebrated Passover together. As Mary's friend, I felt honored to be with her. We were still asleep when suddenly the door banging and banging and banging, and the disciple that Jesus loved was standing there, And he said, "You have to come. You have to come." We learn that Jesus had been arrested in the night. The Jewish court, the Sanhedrin, had arrested him and charged him with blasphemy. Blasphemy you could be killed for. And they did a weird thing. They met in the middle of the night. That was against their rules. They never met at night. It was always in the day. Everybody had an opportunity to be heard and have witnesses. But Jesus had none. And what was happening when the disciple called on us is they were moving him to Pilate. They were moving to the very scary Roman official that could cause Jesus to be put to death. We stood in the shadows because we weren't allowed in that area. And we were afraid because they would know who we are. The crowd there was not the same crowd that was there when Jesus came in through the gates. It was not the same crowd from a week ago when everyone was cheering and so happy to see him. This was a different group. They were Barnabas's friends who had come to see if they could get him saved. But we watched them. And Pilate kept talking to Jesus. We couldn't hear exactly what he said, but we could see that they were talking. And Pilate was afraid. And Pilate, he didn't want to do this. It was something you could see in his face. And he kept coming back and forth to Jesus. And finally, he asked the crowd if they should save Jesus. And they yelled no. They wanted their friend, Barabbas. Barabbas was a revolutionary. Everyone knew he was the man who was always fighting the Romans. He was known as the dagger. People were afraid of him, but they also knew he was always fighting for them. Where were the people that day that welcomed Jesus in? Where were they? Probably like us, asleep from the wonderful Passover meal. They said Jesus would be crucified, and they flogged him, and Mary could not stand it, and we were hiding her and trying to keep her from crying out. And then they put a cross on his back, and they made him walk through the streets the longest way so everyone could see him. And he fell, and Mary cried out, and we tried to get her to stay behind, but she ran up, and she looked in Jesus's face, but he was looking down, and suddenly a man from Cyrene was given the cross, and Jesus was led away. We didn't let Mary go out, but we could hear Jesus cry out when they put the nails in his hands and they put him up on the cross. Mary broke away from us, and we ran after her, and we sat with her at the base of the cross as Jesus suffered. We watched him, and he was quiet. He didn't cry out. The robbers on both sides of him were both talking to him, but we couldn't hear what they said. But we finally heard him say to one man that he would be with him in paradise. He would be with him. It was all day. It was only 9 o'clock in the morning when they took him and put him up on that cross. But by noon, suddenly the sky went black. It was like something had put its hand over the sun. It was just dark. But we didn't leave. People left. They were afraid. People were running and yelling, and people were crying out. And finally, the people who had heard about this, that had come at the beginning, they started coming in and crying out for Jesus. The darkness stayed. Suddenly at 3 o'clock, Jesus said, I'm thirsty. I'm thirsty. And the women, they picked up a sponge, and there was some old wine there, and they put it up to his mouth. And he said, it is done. It is finished. and what he's done. We could see. We could see the spirit leave his body. We could see him dying there. It was the day of Sabbath. Soon at 6 o'clock, Sabbath would start. So everyone was scurrying around trying to get the body off the cross. And Joseph, he loved Jesus, but he was a secret lover of Jesus because he was a Pharisee. He went to Pilate and asked Pilate if he could have Jesus' body. And they took Jesus' body down, and he and his servants carried him to this tomb that he had. And Nicodemus came with almost 100 pounds of herbs and things to help prepare the body. And they hurried and prepared everything, and they closed it. And Joseph was told that he had to seal the tomb, that the rock had to be pushed and sealed tightly, because Pilate was afraid that the Jews would come and steal Jesus, that we, his followers, were going to steal him because we said that he would be raised in 3 days, just to show that he was telling the truth. We had our Sabbath meal, but no one ate. No one prayed. No one drank. We sat with Mary. She wouldn't leave the doorway. She kept saying, "He's coming back. I know he's coming back. He's coming back. I know he's coming back." But he didn't come back. We gave her tea with a little herb to help calm her. Mary Magdalene could not be calmed. She was just so distraught. They just kept crying and wailing and wailing and wailing and wailing. We spent our entire Sabbath Saturday in darkness, in sadness, in fear, because what was going to happen next. But Mary, she just kept looking out the door. She kept knowing and believing something inside her that said something else was going on. She knew something else was going on. But we did not. We did not. We waited with her and cried. We cried.